Rise of Kingdoms is a game with lots of different commanders. There are probably 100 total commanders at the legendary tier alone in the game, and no commander is exactly like another. They all serve some unique or different purpose in the game, and this can be really difficult when you want to rank a commander based on which ones are the best and which ones are the worst, because not only are there hundreds of commanders, there are hundreds of different uses, from gathering to rallying to open field to garrison, Sunset Canyon, Ark of Osiris, things such as Champions of Olympia. There are so many ways to really use commanders and so many different times, whether it be Dark Altars, City Popping, Open Field, Pure Fighting, or even just early game fighting. Every single commander will hold some value at some point. And so in today's video, I will be ranking commanders based on their overall ranking. That is based on everything they can achieve as a commander, and not just on one or two aspects. So if you want to know which commanders are truly currently the best in Rise of Kingdoms, you want to stick around till the end of the video. Now let's quickly begin today's video by discussing what are we going to really rank these commanders based on, because there are so many different things to rank them on, which ones will take more value and which ones will take less value. And really simply, there are going to be a few things that take a lot more value, and the first things that will take lots of value are open field, garrison, and rally potential, because those are going to be the most powerful things in a commander's kit, since the majority of the game is open field fighting. Most things are just open field fighting reskinned, because Ark of Osiris is just a different form of open field fighting. Champions of Olympia, different form of open field fighting. So that is definitely going to add a lot of value to the kit, and you'll find that often commanders who perform really well in the open field will perform really well in those game modes, and as such will get higher rankings. I will also take into account things such as debuffs and unique things in their kits such as that, because those will influence rankings a little bit, because that obviously helps them in the open field and also in other situations in the game. The final things I will take into account are accessibility of the commander. Are they easy to access? Are they easy to upgrade? Do they need high skills, or are they fairly cheap? Do they only need like 5511, or do they need an expertise? And when do you unlock them? Do you unlock them in Season 1, or do you unlock them in the end of the game, literally in Season of Conquest? And then the final thing is, do they perform well in very specific game modes? You'll notice some commanders get higher boosts because they perform extremely well in a certain game mode, but maybe not so well in the open field, though their performance in some types of the game definitely give them a major boost, which is why they will be at higher ranks than you may expect. So now that we know how I'm going to rank the commanders, let's switch over to the tier list. Now here is the tier list, and I've split it up into 5 very distinct tiers, with the top tier being OP everywhere. These commanders are the strongest of the strong. They hold very much value throughout the whole entire game. They are some of the best first investments, best on open field, best in game modes such as Ark of Osiris, and also Champions of Olympia. They are really good as a rally or garrison commander as well, and they are overall some of the strongest commanders in the game. Good everywhere are commanders which serve around 2 to 3 really strong purposes. Maybe they're a really good garrison and really good in open field. Maybe they're really good at debuffing and really good in open field and really good at garrison. And they may have a restriction such as they don't work with many commanders. So good everywhere is commanders that don't just make that cut for OP everywhere, but they are quite close behind, though they just are not at the level where I could justify them in OP everywhere. Average or unique is pretty simple. They're either very average across the board, or they hold a lot of different uses but not very good at all of them. And then the unique part is if there's a few commanders out there which are just super unique and hold a lot of value in some situations but suck in other situations, they will be placed into that ranking. Bad usually are commanders which you only tap into very rarely. Maybe they're only good average in some situations, and you would only use them if you already have them maxed, but they're not usually your go-to choice. And then trash are commanders which have absolutely no use in the game, and even if you had them maxed, you would never ever use them. Now that we know what all the tiers mean, let's start off with our first commander, and that's going to be Ethelflaed, and I'm going to put her into good everywhere. And the reason I'm going to do this is because when we look at Ethelflaed, she actually is a very valuable commander, especially due to the fact that she's literally free. You can use her in pretty much every single game mode, and she's going to do either average or slightly above average. She's slightly above average on the open field, in my opinion, since she has good debuffs. She is really good in the early game with a lot of different commanders. She works with a ton of commanders. She's got a museum relic. She works in Ark of Osiris, Champions of Olympia, Sunset Canyon. There is really not a single place in the game where I can say Ethelflaed is a genuinely bad commander. And even at the end of the day, you can still use her to fight barbarians as well, because she is a peacekeeping commander, and she's got an AoE, so I don't think you can really knock Ethelflaed too bad in any situation. She might be a little bit squishy on the field, but I think that the good everywhere is a fairly decent category for her. She just won't be at the top of that tier. Then with Alexander Nevsky, he's just going to go into OP everywhere because he is Nevsky. He is great in just about every single situation. I don't think there's a single situation in the game where Nevsky is an inherently bad choice. He's a good rally, he's a good open field commander, he's probably one of the best open field commanders. He's a good investment right now, he's very good in game modes like Sunset Canyon, Ark of Osiris, Champions of Olympia. There is really no way you can say Nevsky is bad. Then with the other Alexander the Great, I'm going to put him in average or unique, and he's going to probably be up to the top of that tier, purely because when we look at Alexander the Great's kit, he is a fairly strong commander on the open field, but I don't think he serves as many purposes in game modes such as Ark of Osiris and Champions of Olympia, and even game modes such as Sunset Canyon, because he doesn't have the stats to really back himself in those situations, and especially in Sunset Canyon, his march speed is not as important, and even in Champions of Olympia, march speed is not the most important thing. It's useful, but it's not as important as Ark of Osiris and also open field, so he's probably going to sit in the average or unique tier for me. Then also Attila is going to sit in average or unique because he is good on the open field as an anti-swarm commander. He's like a fast Pakal. It is a decent city rally, but other than that, he doesn't bring too much, so you couldn't really justify putting him any higher. Xiao Xiao is going to go into bad usually, only because he is good in KVK1. You can't deny Xiao Xiao in KVK1 is fairly decent, and with his double relic, he's okay in the later game. But other than that, he's an okay barb rally, and that's pretty much it. So bad usually is probably the tier for Xiao Xiao, because other than that, he's just okay in some situations. Now Cheping is going to go into probably the top of good everywhere, purely because he doesn't really have much rally or garrison potential, but he is still a strong cavalry open field commander, and he's got some unique stuff in his kit, like Zhang Yu's pretty much faster rage gain. He's got an okay debuff, pretty much. He's also got a march speed debuff, so he's not the worst commander I've ever seen, but he's definitely not one of the best overall commanders, so I would say that he's going to sit in that good everywhere tier. Then we got Moctezuma, who I'm going to put in average or unique, but probably towards the bottom, because Moctezuma's kit is really debuff related, and that's all he's really got going for him. He's an open field debuff commander. Maybe a few years ago when he was a rally, he would be a higher ranking, but at the moment, he's average or unique. I'm going to put Charlemagne in trash. I'm going to put Charles Martel into average or unique, just below Alexander the Great, because Charles Martel is actually shockingly strong overall, because when you look at his kit, he's accessed in the gold gear, so he's basically free. He's got a relic, he can be a city garrison. He's a good garrison in KVK1 and even partly in KVK2. He's a decent rally in KVK2 with Alexander the Great, and he holds value into the end game. So I can't knock Charles Martel overall, but he's definitely not one of those top commanders. Margaret and also Barbara are going to go into average or unique. I often put them in this tier because they are decent in open field, but they are difficult to use. They're not the strongest commanders out there, but they are obviously extremely unique and your only option for ranged commanders currently in the game. So I think they have a lot of potential, but they definitely aren't some of the strongest out there, but they are fairly decent. Also with Lao Che, he's just going to go into OP everywhere, because when we look at Lao Che, where is he not really performing well right now? 5 target AoE, it's stronger than Zhu Lang. He works well with pretty much every single infantry commander in the game. I don't see a way you could really knock Lao Che, and OP everywhere is definitely the main tier for him. I'm going to put Cleopatra in maybe bad usually because she does gather, she's not absolute trash, and you get her for free, and even more for free from events that give you her sculptures from like those pick one boxes. Then with Constantine, we're going to put him in average or unique because he is one of the best, if not the best commander for Sunset Canyon, there is no denying it. And if you use him, you're going to get rank 1, but if not, you might get like rank 50. So Constantine is one of those commanders where he is extremely good in that one situation, but other than that, he is not too amazing. Justinian is also going to go into average or unique. He's decent on the open field and is a really good rally, but he's not at that level of good everywhere. But I will probably put him just in front of Alexander the Great because he does have that rally potential and he's probably the same field potential as Alexander the Great, though he is a little bit harder to access. So that is one of the main reasons why he is not in the good everywhere tier. Gilgamesh is going to go into bad usually. I know that might be shocking because he does have a debuff. He is somewhat okay in open field, but really nowadays his rally potential is starting to hardcore fall off. When we look at Gilgamesh, he's really main counter. He was countering Zenobia's, and Zenobia is not the garrison meta anymore, and Gilgamesh is not the rally meta anymore. Everybody just swarms Gilgamesh nowadays. No one really runs him. I rarely see a Gilgamesh rally, and his damage is very low. So bad usually is probably the spot for Gilgamesh to reside. YSS is also going to go into bad usually because YSS is an okay city garrison, is an okay mixed troop garrison, but he's not too amazing. I'm going to put Jan Ziska in average or unique because he's a good garrison right now, and I've seen him work somewhat in Sunset Canyon actually, shocking enough. So he does have some other uses besides garrison, though he's definitely not the meta commander for Canyon, though he does have some usage there. And I think he's a very good garrison, so he's definitely worthy of that tier. Zenobia is going to go into bad usually because compared to current infantry garrisons, especially compared to Gorgo, she just isn't at that top tier level and she doesn't really synergize well with Gorgo. So I don't think Zenobia is going to stick in that garrison meta much longer. She is probably still a bit better than YSS, she's still got some uses, but she definitely is not the go-to garrison for a lot of players nowadays. Sargon is going to go into good everywhere just behind Hao Bing because Sargon is a fairly good commander on the open field, probably one of the best infantry commanders. He works really well with Hao, but he doesn't really have much rally potential. He's obviously not a garrison, and he's definitely not one of the most overpowered investments right now, due to the fact that smite damage may be the new meta and he's heavily reliant on skill damage debuffs. So I think placing him in good everywhere is very justifiable. I would be tempted to put him above Hao Bing. Maybe I will because he does have a lot of debuffs and a lot of open field potential. So he's just not at that OP everywhere, he's just slightly below it, but I think he is worthy of the good everywhere tier. I'm going to put Edward of Woodstock in trash and also El Cid in trash. Edward of Woodstock is an average field commander and that's all he's got going for him. El Cid is pretty much bad in every single situation. Tariq is going to go into average or unique. He's a fairly decent rally. He's probably on par with Justinian. I'd put him just below Justinian in my opinion. He's a fairly decent open field commander as well, but he's definitely not meta breaking. So I think putting him in average or unique is also justifiable. Frederick is a trash commander. I think there's no way around it. The only time he has some use is a 5-1-1-1 Frederick at the start of KVK1. Other than that though, he is not a go-to at all. I'm going to put Zhulang in OP everywhere because when we look at him, he's definitely one of, if not the best commanders in the game. I think single-handedly, Zhulang is probably the strongest in the game out of any commander, and just purely because of that, he goes in the OP everywhere category. I've seen him used in Rally, I've seen him used in Garrison, I've seen him used in obviously Open Field and Sunset Canyon and Dark of Osiris and Champions of Olympia, and the list just goes on and on, where he performs really well, and he's got a 5-target, really powerful AoE debuff. So I don't think you can knock Zhulang in almost any way, and he's very deserving of the OP everywhere tier. I'm going to put Genghis Khan in bad usually because he's got some usage as a Cav Open Field commander if you get him in the early game, and he's got some okay usage endgame, but he's definitely not a meta commander. Rams is also going to go into bad usually. He's okay in some game modes like Ark of Osiris because he's got a decent amount of march speed, but he's not the most overpowered commander right now. He doesn't have a relic yet. However, he can definitely do some okay damage on the open field, though he definitely is not the meta. Hannibal Barco is going to go in trash. I'm going to put Harold into average or unique as well. A lot of commanders will fall under this category. Harold is one of those commanders where he's decent on the open field right now. He's a fairly decent city popping commander. He has some usage in other game modes, especially Champions of Olympia, but he's not meta breaking, so I couldn't justify putting him any higher. Bertrand is going to go into bad usually. I know that might be shocking. He's usually on the average or unique tier, but when we look at his overall performance in the game, he's not an amazing rally. He's average in the open field. He doesn't work as a garrison. He's not amazing in Canyon. He's not amazing in Ark of Osiris. So I don't really see a way where Bertrand could be a strong commander, especially since Justinian Nevsky literally just performs better than him, even though he is supposed to be the rally commander. Artemisia is going to go into average or unique because she works extremely well with Boudica Prime, but not much else with other commanders. So she's one of those commanders where she's really good with one commander, she's not really good garrison anymore, she's not really an amazing commander with other commanders, so she doesn't really get to go a higher rank. If she was more versatile, she would go into good everywhere, but for now, she's going to have to sit in average or unique. Suleiman is a pretty bad commander. Trajan is going to go also probably into good everywhere because I would say that he has a lot of usage in other game modes. I know he may not be the best choice for the open field where 6 DPS marches will be better than having a Trajan, but having a Trajan in game modes like Champions of Olympia is almost compulsory. Having him in Ark of Osiris is almost compulsory, so I don't see a way where you could get away with not running a Trajan, because Trajan is one of those commanders where if you have to use him, you have to use him. It's going to be one of the best choices available for a lot of game modes, and he's one of the only buffing commanders currently in the game. Cyrus is going to go into average or unique, but probably towards the bottom. Really good debuffs. I reckon he's slightly better than the siege commanders. He's decent on the open field. He's got a lot of value in Dark Altars and Ancient Ruins. That's where he really excels in my opinion. And I think he's got some okay open field value, like I said before, but he's also not meta breaking. Guan Yu is going to go into good everywhere purely because when we look at his comparison and his power in other game modes besides open field, I would say that he's one of the better commanders. He works really, really well in Ark of Osiris, probably one of the best commanders for that game mode because you can just swarm down rallies just like mad with Guan Yu's and permanently silence them. He is really good at swarming down garrisons in Ark of Osiris, and if you're willing to take a lot of deads, he can bring really good debuffs when swarming normal flags. So a lot of whales will still run Guan Yu, and I think that is 100% justifiable because he is one of those commanders where if you want him and you need his debuff, he's going to be one of the best choices for a lot of things. Scipio Africanus is going to OP everywhere because he is one of the best infantry commanders like Lao Che, arguably better in some situations or most situations, so he's definitely deserving of that tier. Boudica Prime is also going to go into OP everywhere with having a lot of archer pairings, a really good debuff for now, and she's a fairly decent rally if you're not being swarmed. She's a fairly decent garrison. She can work as a city garrison. She's not amazing, but she can work if you really need her, and she's also probably the best and easiest to access archer commander besides Yulang because you can just get her from a Wheel of Fortune, which is really, really easy. Pakal is going to go into average or unique, very similar reasons to Attila. He's basically just a slower version of Attila, that's the only difference. He is really anti-swarm, he's a fairly bad rally nowadays, and he has some okay pairings with Harold, but he's a little bit difficult to access, so that is the main reason why Attila and Pakal are in the same tier. I'm going to put Leonidas in bad usually, doesn't really work well with Guan anymore, and he's definitely not absolutely amazing. Honda is going to go into probably average or unique as well. He is one of those commanders where you can put him with pretty much anyone, and he's going to do pretty well, but he's not going to be absolutely amazing, so you can't really put him much higher in the list, and you definitely can't put him lower. So he's pretty good with a lot of commanders, but he's not game-breaking. Then we've got Gorgo, the newest infantry commander to the game, and she's going to go into good everywhere as well, because when we look at Gorgo's kit, she's a really strong garrison, and she's probably one of the best infantry commanders currently available, and the only issue with her is she only works well with Lao Che on the open field. So Gorgo is one of those commanders where I can only put her in that OP everywhere tier if she had more pairings, but for now, she doesn't, so you can't really put her much higher than that. Nebuchadnezzar is going to go into average or unique, I would say slightly above Honda, because he's probably the third best archer commander in the game in terms of primary commanders, and he has a lot of pairings, and he's a decent rally as well, but the thing is, he's not game-breaking either. Nebuchadnezzar is currently not the best investment. I've noticed mine is also starting to struggle on the open field, so I don't think Nebu has a lot more time available as a strong commander, and eventually he's going to be falling down the tiers. Then we got Joan Prime. She's just going to go in OP everywhere. She's probably one of the best commanders currently in the game for the open field. She works really well with Nevsky, and she works amazingly in most situations in the game, even game modes like Ark of Osiris and Sunset Canyon. She's going to do really well because that double instant AoE is going to give her advantages over other commanders, which allow her to trade better. Ishida is going to go into bad usually, and I'm also just going to chuck Sundok in there because there's no point talking about all three of those commanders. They are literally the same. Hedwig is going to go into average or unique. She's a decent cav garrison, but she's not that amazing compared to basically a Jan Ziska Heraclius, though she does have her uses. Julius Caesar is going to go into probably bad usually. Overall, he is not game breaking. He's a fairly decent secondary to some specific commanders, but he is not the best choice. You would probably go for a Honda or a Mehmed for a lot more commanders, rather than going for a Julius Caesar, so you can't really justify putting him in a higher rank. Lubu is going to go in trash. I don't see a single use for him, especially since Nevsky basically has his defense debuff nowadays. Mehmed's going to go just below Honda. I think they are pretty much equal. They serve very similar purposes, and the main reason you use them is as a secondary to most other commanders, so they are really just placeholder commanders, and Mehmed is not absolutely insane. Minamoto is going to go into good everywhere purely because he works well as a rally for peacekeeping, he works well as a KVK 1 and 2 commander, but he's not game breaking. And since he's also accessible, I think he does deserve the good everywhere tier, but he doesn't really deserve much higher, and he's probably almost on the cusp of moving down a tier if anything, especially due to the fact he is pay to win. CJ is going to go into the average or unique tier, being one of the okay infantry commanders currently available, but he's not absolutely amazing. I wouldn't really put him above a lot of other commanders, and if you have him, you can use him and he'll do well, but you wouldn't go out of your way to get him nowadays, which is why he definitely is going to sit pretty much at the bottom of this tier. Mulan is going to go into bad usually because the only use she truly has is as a secondary to Trajan, but the thing is, Trajan has a good free secondary being Ethelfled, so I don't think you really need Mulan unless you're a Mega Whale, and due to that fact, she is not one of those stronger commanders where you can justify using her over some of these other commanders. Then Henry is going to go into good everywhere, being one of the strongest archer commanders in the game as a primary commander especially, and a fairly decent rally. You can't really knock him, but he's definitely not one of the most overpowered in the game. I would say he's slightly worse than Gorgo, because they are pretty much the same type of commander. Only difference is Gorgo has debuffs, Henry doesn't, and Henry has a lot of pairings. Gorgo only works with Lao Che. Ragnar is going to go into bad usually. He's pretty much just a substitute for Takeda, and I'm also going to put Takeda there. They're only really used in the Attila-Takeda combination and only used in the Attila-Takeda rally. The reason Attila is not in bad usually is because Attila works well with Nevsky, and Takeda and obviously Ragnar do not. I'm going to put Richard also into bad usually, but probably the top of the category, because when we look at Richard, he's one of those commanders where works really well in KVK 1 and also somewhat in KVK 2, but he loses value quite quickly after that, and the only reason you would use him is for AoE barb farming, but he is a cheap investment which does give him a nice advantage. Saladin is going to go into probably average or unique. I feel that he is worthy of that tier because he has some okay value still, but he's definitely not one of the best commanders. I might just put him slightly above CJ because he is also on the cusp of moving down this tier. When we look at him compared to other commanders, a lot of commanders nowadays bring a slow debuff, whether it be Lao Che literally doing it to 5 marches, or Hao Che Bing, or other commanders which just have slows like Ethelfled. You can't 100% justify running a Saladin nowadays. And since his skill damage reduction, one of the strongest things in his kit, is bypassed by smite damage, he definitely is not one of the safest investments at the moment. Flavius is also going to go into average or unique, being one of the best garrison commanders, but he's definitely not a go-to open field commander, so unless you're planning to run him with a Gorgo in the garrison, you wouldn't really use him anywhere else. Moctezuma is going to go in trash for obvious reasons. I might as well just throw in Wuzetian and Theodora while we're at it. All three of those commanders serve very little usage. Wuzetian is an okay KVK 2 garrison, so I put her at the top of trash, but she's a really heavy investment for literally just 1 KVK, and then she fully loses value after that. You never ever use her again, so I even forget she is in the game. That's how bad she truly is. Heraclius is going to go in average or unique, maybe just above all the other garrison commanders, because he is one of the most versatile garrison commanders. He works with any commander and any troop, so you can't really say he's the worst garrison, and I think overall he is one of the better garrison commanders, though I do think Gorgo holds more value than him overall. I'm going to put Thutmose in probably bad usually. I mean, he has some usage on the open field and some usage as the KVK1 rally, but he's not absolutely amazing, and without his double relic, he's definitely not one of the stronger commanders. Paris is going to go into average or unique, maybe just below Pakal, because when you look at him, he's a decent infantry commander. He works well with Lao Che, he works well with Alexander the Great, and he works well with a few other infantry commanders, but he's not one of the most overpowered infantry commanders, though he does serve his usages even in Season of Conquest. Dido is going to go maybe just below Heraclius, just below Flavius actually. She's a decent garrison right now, and she's definitely not the absolute meta anymore, especially with Gorgo now in the game, but she is still fairly good as an archer garrison, and that is a much needed update to archers who were really struggling with their garrisons. Amanatoro is going to go into bad usually. She's not a very good garrison, she's okay on the open field, she's a really heavy investment, and she has a very minor debuff, so I can't really justify her over a lot of other commanders. Tamaris is also going to go in bad usually. Why would you use her when you can really just use Sargon is the question nowadays. Maybe like 3 to 4 months ago where Sargon didn't have as many overpowered pairings, you could justify Tamaris. But nowadays, I don't know if you really can justify her over a Sargon. Sargon is just so much better in pretty much every regard at the moment that Tamaris is definitely not one of the strongest commanders, though she does have a relic, so I might actually put her at the bottom of average or unique because her relic is fairly decent, though obviously it is not game-breaking. William is going to go into good everywhere. He's not absolutely game-breaking, he works pretty well in things such as Sunset Canyon, he works okay in game modes like Ark of Osiris and Champions of Olympia, and is a very good open field commander, but he's not one of the most overpowered commanders I've ever seen, though he does have a lot of unique usages. Zhang Yu is going to go into average or unique. He works pretty well as basically a different version of Hao Che Bing, but you would rather go for a Hao Che Bing nowadays over a Zhang Yu, though Zhang Yu definitely does work in game modes like Sunset Canyon where you want a really fast rage cycle quite well, because unlike Hao Che Bing who has to wait 30 seconds, Zhang Yu doesn't. He instantly gets that rage cycle, so he works as a city popping commander, he works in Sunset Canyon, he works in open field. I don't really see where Zhang Yu works bad, but he's not amazing compared to a lot of the newer and more modern commanders. And then as the final commander, we have YSG, and I'm going to put him maybe just above Alexander the Great because you get him a little bit earlier. He is pretty much the same as Alexander the Great in the fact that you would use him mainly as a commander in KVK 1 and 2, and then you would carry him on to the endgame. Thing is though, he doesn't have as much potential as Alexander the Great, though you get him much earlier, so it is much easier to get free gold heads for him rather than using Alexander the Great, who you may only get value from him for like 1 KVK max. You'll pretty much get value from YS Chief for 2 KVKs. So now there is the final tier list, with the good everywhere commanders being ranked in order and the down to the bad usually commanders being ranked in order. The trash commanders are all equally bad, and the OP everywhere commanders are all equally good. So that is the final tier list in order, in my opinion, from the best to the worst commanders. Now that you've made it to the end of my overall commander ranking video, you may be interested in which commanders work really well on the open field specifically, because a lot of players in this game are open field mains. There's no doubt about it. I know the majority of you people watching are always asking me questions about open field marches. So if you want to know which commanders are the best for the open field, you want to check out the video that is linked on the end screen now. I highly recommend it. It's a very short video and it's really, really good to find out which commanders are the meta right now so you don't make the wrong decisions. So now I just want to say thank you for watching and hope to see you in the next one.